As I've listened to a number of podcasts over the last few weeks, I've realized one of the biggest things that basketball players, basketball coaches, basketball strength and conditioning coaches do not do enough of is pure sprint training. And it's debatable. I mean, many people would argue that in a basketball game or a basketball court, there's not really enough room for a player to get to max velocity. Most of the movements are going to be, quick bursts, change of directions, acceleration, deceleration type work. And so from a specificity standpoint, that's where most of the time, that's where most of the conditioning, that's where most of the strengthening should take place in those areas. And I wouldn't disagree with that in terms of specificity, and certainly there needs to be a portion of the year spent on that type of work, the change of direction work, acceleration, deceleration. But I do think that we miss the boat in terms of pure sprint training, because I think it has such a carryover to almost anything that we're going to do in sports, but also in basketball. Even though we think of basketball as a vertical sport or a jumping sport, it's really a movement or a running-based sport. There's more changes of direction, there's more sprints, there's more ground-based movement than there is, jumping in a game. And so I think sprinting, to me, I nearly asked this on my strength and conditioning final. I was going to ask what's the one exercise you would do if you were a strength and conditioning coach, just to see what my students had learned and how they could argue a point. But in my mind, the one answer that I had was sprinting. In almost any sport, if I was only able to do one thing, I think it would be sprinting, because the carryover is big in terms of, everything, from a muscular standpoint, power standpoint, speed standpoint, everything that we want to get out of athletes, is incorporated in sprinting. And so when I was a strength and conditioning coach, we did a decent amount of, short sprints. We rarely ran anything, I think, in a straight line greater than about 50 yards. But most of our work tended to be more towards the sprint endurance. Looking back, we probably didn't do any pure sprint or pure speed work, whether that be, running 30s or just pure speed work where we're giving the body sufficient recovery time that makes it actual speed work. The tendency, or reduced volume that makes it speed work. Typically, in most training sessions, for field sports or court sports, we reduce the rest period, and then it becomes more sprint endurance or repeat sprint type work, and not actual speed work. For true speed work, we need to heavily reduce volume from what would be typical in the basketball workout, and we need to increase the rest periods. If we're, one sprint and then rest, 8 to 10 minutes before we do our next sprint. That's what we're going to have to do for more speed work, which isn't, I've never seen that in a basketball setting. I'm sure somewhere somebody's doing it, but I think it's unusual based on the workouts that I've seen and the workouts that, when I talk to other coaches or players that they're doing. But I think we're missing an important aspect of training if we never do pure speed work with basketball players, even if we can make the argument that, because of the, length of the court, we're never really going to reach max velocity on a basketball court. I think having that ability to reach higher speeds is going to make, the short sprints, we're going to have greater speed over those short sprints. And I think just from a physiological standpoint, the speed training has so many benefits that can ultimately then be transferred into, basketball performance and the physiology of being a great basketball player.